What if I told you the biggest company in home entertainment, a giant with 9,000 stores, was offered the chance to buy Netflix for just $50 million? Instead of accepting, they laughed the founders out of the room. This is the story of the single worst business decision of the 21st century, and how that one moment of arrogance led to the complete collapse of a titan. For anyone who grew up in the 80s and 90s, the bright blue and yellow ticket stub of Blockbuster was more than just a logo. It was a symbol of Friday night, of family movie time, of the thrill of discovery. Blockbuster was an unstoppable king, a multi-billion-dollar empire that dominated how the world watched movies. But in a small corner of Silicon Valley, a tiny startup named Netflix was mailing DVDs in red envelopes, an idea that seemed strange, almost laughable. This is the ultimate underdog story of how a scrappy innovator took on a corporate giant. But it's also a powerful cautionary tale about the most dangerous mind tick in business: the arrogance that comes with success and the refusal to adapt to a changing world. Join us as Mind Ticks unwraps the epic battle between Netflix and Blockbuster, a war that didn't just create a new company, but completely redefined entertainment as we know it. To understand how big this battle was, you first have to understand the undisputed king of the castle, Blockbuster. In the mid-1990s, Blockbuster was everywhere. At its peak, it had over 9,000 stores worldwide, a new one opening somewhere on the globe every 17 hours. It was more than a store. It was a cultural institution. The company's business model was simple, but incredibly profitable. You'd drive to the store, browse the aisles, rent a movie for a few dollars, and bring it back in a couple of days. But the real genius of Blockbuster's model, the thing that made them billions, was a source of endless frustration for customers: late fees. If you returned that movie even a day late, you'd get hit with a penalty. In the year 2000 alone, Blockbuster made an estimated $800 million from late fees. That's nearly the value of the entire company that would eventually destroy them. This was Blockbuster's mind tick, a rigid focus on its incredibly profitable but deeply unpopular retail model. They saw late fees not as a customer service problem, but as a brilliant source of revenue. This single point of arrogance would become their fatal flaw. Meanwhile, in California, a man named Reed Hastings, a successful software engineer, was fuming. The story goes that he had rented the movie Apollo 13, returned it late, and was hit with a massive $40 late fee. As he drove away from the Blockbuster, embarrassed and annoyed, a thought popped into his head. What if movie rentals worked like a gym membership? A flat monthly fee, no late fees, and you could keep the movie for as long as you wanted. This idea, born from a moment of pure customer frustration, was the seed of Netflix. In 1997, Hastings and his co-founder, Mark Randolph, decided to test the idea. But there was a new technology on the horizon that would make their idea possible: the DVD. It was small, light, and cheap to mail. They put a CD in a greeting card envelope, mailed it to Hastings' house, and when it arrived the next day, completely intact, they knew they had a business. Netflix, the world's first online DVD rental store, was born. In its early days, it was a paper rent service, just like Blockbuster, but online. The idea was simple, but the execution was a struggle. They were a tiny company losing money, trying to compete with a global giant. By the year 2000, Netflix was in serious trouble. The dot-com bubble had just burst, wiping out countless internet startups. Investors were scared, and Netflix was burning through cash. They were on the brink of failure. Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph knew they needed a lifeline. So, they decided to do the unthinkable. They would fly to Dallas, to the headquarters of their biggest rival, Blockbuster, and offer to sell them the company. Their proposal was this: Blockbuster would buy Netflix for $50 million. Netflix would then become Blockbuster's online brand. They would run the online business, while Blockbuster continued to run the stores. In their minds, it was a perfect partnership. Netflix would get the financial stability and brand recognition of Blockbuster, and Blockbuster would get a ready-made entry into the new world of online business, heading off a potential future competitor. Hastings and Randolph walked into that meeting full of hope, believing they were presenting the deal of a lifetime. What happened next would become Silicon Valley legend. They laid out their vision to the Blockbuster CEO, John Antioco, and his team of executives. They explained the subscription model, the power of the internet, the future of home entertainment. Then they named their price, $50 million. The Blockbuster team didn't just say no. According to Mark Randolph's account, they struggled to keep a straight face. They were openly laughing at them. The idea that this tiny, money-losing online company was worth $50 million was, to them, utterly absurd. The king had no interest in a strange new invention from a couple of court jesters. The meeting was over. Hastings and Randolph were dismissed, their idea ridiculed. They flew back to California, not just rejected, but humiliated. That laughter, that moment of pure corporate arrogance, changed everything. The mission was no longer about survival or finding a partner. The mind tick of Netflix was now forged in the fire of that insult. It became a personal quest. It became about revenge. They would not just survive. They would prove Blockbuster wrong. They would make them pay for that laughter. Fueled by that rejection, Netflix went all in on their subscription model. No late fees, a flat monthly rate, as many movies as you could watch. It was a direct attack on Blockbuster's most profitable and most hated feature. At first, it was a slow burn. But as more and more people got DVD players and internet access, the idea started to catch on. People loved the convenience. They loved the massive selection online, far bigger than any physical store. And most of all, they loved the absence of late fees. Blockbuster, meanwhile, was blinded by its own success. Their mind tick of arrogance was in full effect. They saw Netflix not as a threat, but as a tiny, irrelevant niche. Why would they give up their $800 million in late fees to chase a subscription model? Their stores were still packed. Their profits were still high. They believed their empire was invincible. They saw the world as it was, not as it was going to be. But the world was changing. In 2004, Blockbuster finally realized its mistake and launched its own online service to compete with Netflix. It was a case of too little, too late. They were clumsy. They struggled to integrate their online service with their thousands of physical stores. The company was now fighting a war on two fronts, and its old, slow, retail-focused brain couldn't keep up. The true genius of Netflix, however, wasn't just the mailing of DVDs. It was the data. Their mind tick was one of a technology company, not a retail store. They knew what you watched, what you liked, and what you were likely to watch next. This led to the creation of their recommendation algorithm, a system that could predict what movies you would love with spooky accuracy. Blockbuster knew what was popular in a city. Netflix knew what was popular in your living room. This personalization was something a physical store could never compete with. By 2007, the writing was on the wall. Netflix shipped its billionth DVD. They were profitable, growing, and a darling of Wall Street. Blockbuster, on the other hand, was drowning in debt. Their stores were starting to look empty. Their brand, once a symbol of fun, was now a symbol of frustration and outdated technology. The giant was stumbling badly. The final blow came not from DVDs, but from the future itself, streaming. Reed Hastings saw that mailing discs was just a temporary step. The real future was delivering movies directly over the internet. In 2007, Netflix launched its Watch Now streaming service. It was a risky move. It meant competing with their own successful DVD business. But their mind tick was about adaptability. They were willing to destroy their own creation to build the next big thing. Blockbuster was completely unprepared for this shift. Their entire business was built on physical stores and physical media. They had no answer. In 2010, The same year Netflix began its massive international expansion, Blockbuster, the once mighty king of entertainment, filed for bankruptcy. The empire had collapsed. The laughter in that Dallas boardroom had turned into a deafening silence. Netflix wasn't done. They used their data and their growing profits to make their most audacious move yet, creating their own content. In 2013, they released House of Cards, a high-quality, big-budget series that changed television forever. Netflix was no longer just a distributor of movies. It was a creator, a Hollywood studio in its own right. They had completed their transformation from a humble DVD mailer to a global entertainment superpower. Today, only one single Blockbuster store remains in the entire world. A tourist attraction in Bend, Oregon. A museum to a fallen empire. The story of Netflix versus Blockbuster is one of the most powerful business lessons of the modern era. It's a story of how a small idea, born from a single moment of customer frustration, can topple a giant. Blockbuster's mind tick was a fatal combination of arrogance and resistance to change. They were so focused on protecting their existing profitable model, especially those lucrative late fees, that they became blind to the future. They saw their business as renting tapes from physical stores instead of what it truly was, delivering entertainment to people's homes. They were killed not by Netflix, but by their own refusal to see the world changing around them. Netflix's mind tick, on the other hand, was a powerful mix of customer obsession and relentless adaptability. They started by solving a problem everyone hated: late fees. They used technology and data to create a better experience. And most importantly, they were willing to repeatedly disrupt themselves, pivoting from DVD by mail to streaming, and from streaming to content creation. They were never married to their product. They were married to their mission of making entertainment better and more convenient. The key lessons from this epic battle are clear. Listen to your customers' frustrations. The thing your customers hate the most about your business is often the very thing a competitor will use to destroy you. Don't fall in love with your current success. Arrogance is a death sentence. The moment you believe you're invincible is the moment you become vulnerable. Be willing to disrupt yourself. If you don't make your own business model obsolete, someone else will. In the end, this legendary feud wasn't just about DVDs or streaming. It was a clash of mindsets, and it teaches us a timeless truth. In a fast-changing world, the future doesn't belong to the biggest or the most powerful. It belongs to the ones who are willing to adapt.